Merry Christmas, ladies and gentlemen, and to celebrate, I have decided to do the complete opposite thing and talk about the haunting mythology behind Call of Duty Zombies. And so I gotta give a big shout out here to Rakefire and Paula for this video, but honestly, God bless, Jesus Christ is King, but what's getting scary in Call of Duty Zombies?
I have
bro?
been in
What's
hiding.
happening?
There is
I'm
a
nervous.
group of higher beings that are after me.
Who's after
discovering
you?
information not really meant
Some
for me.
keepers, man.
I don't mean the CIA, but rather these ancient beings called the Vrilya.
And so the Vrilya are actually the keepers. It's crazy because the Vrilya, I think we're going to be something different in Jimmy Zielinski's story.
Let me tell you all about it from the
But,
beginning.
oh,
It all started in
man.
2010 when I was about 6 years old. I had this
Dang.
opportunity given to me by one of my brothers to
I
try
was
out
12.
the secret game mode called Zombies in the all-too-popular
sir.
Call of Duty series. As a kid, only really played Midnight Club 3 and Halo 3 for the most part.
Legit, I started on Halo before Call of Duty, so I knew nothing about
I was
the COD.
intrigued, and so I decided it was about time I try out
I
and experience
know.
Kino. Aiding me, he joined me in split screen as we made our way through the rounds, mostly by camping in the staircase in whatever corner we could find, but at a good round
Yeah, camping was all we knew how to do back then. We didn't know how to move, bro.
7, it was time for him to go to school. And so I was left all alone in this decrepit theater as silence permeated through my then empty house, leaving me alone with my thoughts. And also the rotting corpse of player 2, but that's not really
No, never going for him, bro. Just go for the round 30.
So I didn't make it far.
Literally.
I lasted all but 2 minutes, which is not only a problem for her, but also a problem for me, because I didn't really get a chance to discover the theater in its entirety, you see.
Right.
My nerves simply got the best of me.
That's the thing with the lore in COD Zombies. You can't just do it in one game. I mean, maybe nowadays you can, but back then, it would take like 20 games half the time.
Perspective wouldn't have been a problem at all. In fact, sitting here hiding in this musty basement, I wish I could have left well enough alone. I went back numerous times thereafter playing solo. When the brain is all but 6 years into development, it wouldn't really have the capability to make sense of the subtle details.
No, literally. Like, I even remember playing COD at 12, and I didn't pick up on like 80%, 99% of things. Let's just
On this map. I've already discussed how I would always brace myself, aiming to reach the dogs round at the very least, only to end up quitting the game afterward, feeling utterly creeped out. However, I did end up...
the creepy crawlers as a kid freaked me out. Even the spiders on Zetsubo in that release, I was like 18 years old and that freaked me out, bro.
Building
that was only 7 years ago.
After a couple games. Enough to really wander around the map and make sense of it all. I was already mesmerized by the spectacle of this haunted theater, you see, but it wasn't the dusty curtains, the creaking floorboards, nor the subtle chimes of the chandelier that fully caught my attention. Rather, it was the vats on the stage.
I know, bro. When you see the face, that freaked me out, bro. I was like, who is that in there?
Containing the decaying bodies of what appeared to be these strange beings, quite distinct from the zombies I was familiar with at that point.
Even as a kid, I thought that these were the Nova Crawlers. And that's, I think, what freaked me out about the Nova Crawlers even more, is that they came from this. Like, look at his face! Ah,
Seeing
no,
these
man.
peculiar, otherworldly remains happened to be the biggest mistake of my life. Aside from the time I tried to make homemade...
I also just recently went to Egypt and I saw the mummies. Oh, so the pyramids were for the mummies' tombs, right? But the Egyptian government took out all the mummies and I got to see them in a museum. You weren't able to take any photos, but literally that's what that face reminds me of. When I looked at the mummified faces of the pharaohs and it looked like they were looking back at me, the energy in that room freaked me out so bad, I will never go back. I highly don't recommend going to check out the mummies because I just felt like it was cursed. Like, I felt like I took something home after that, bro. So,
you see, as time went on,
I don't like that.
I ended up entrenching myself further and further into the lore and mysteries surrounding this game mode. At the time, there was none of that Apothicon and Keeper bullshit introduced almost a decade later. The only thing people could do was theorize and make sense of what the lore did give us. The teams of not...
So it makes you think, like, this is more of the original zombie storyline than even what BO3 started.
The experimentation with Group 935 perpetrating it all was always at the forefront. One could have easily looked at the vats and just chalked it up to that and called it a day.
Because we didn't have like a timeline, we didn't have YouTubers, we didn't have videos explaining and breaking it all down. all that was left for you to find was what was given. And that's when like the scarcity of information just added so much more to the original story, which I don't think is even possible nowadays, considering how much news and information is just accessible at your fingertips in 2023. So
I
don't know.
for one, wish I did so, but there was always more nuance to it than just that. You see, in the initial lore, the main hook was always that this research group came across these meteors that fell from outer space, noting that they seemed to hold strange ethereal powers.
Ever since Shinonuma, which is why Origins was so sick. It took all the myths from all of the zombie maps prior to it and literally created that as the center theme of the map, which was just so cool, man.
Element 115, they proceeded to use its powers to aid the Nazis in World War II. However, this isn't the only manifestations of the Nazis' fascination with the occult. In fact, the Nazis have always had a long-standing affiliation with the supernatural in real life.
And that's what makes it scary, is because part of this actually kind of did happen. A lot of it, it's hard to tell if it's real or mythological, but back in World War II, they were trying to reanimate soldiers, and Die Glock, which is what we see in Derice, is a real-life project that happened, and it's just like, man, like, this is like almost like we're watching an alternate dimension in a way. One crazy, wacky one, but who knows, man?
Believing that its power could aid them in the war effort.
Oh, it's
now,
freaky.
It might have been the crystal meth Hitler was known for abusing.
Literally,
Probably the
bro.
crystal meth.
Yeah.
Most likely the crystal meth. But
It literally just wasn't anything else. I mean, they were into some deep stuff. And again, a lot of this is hard to tell if it's actually factual or not, you know, considering that it just sounds like fiction.
It's had a fascination with the mystic Aryan race and their alleged supremacy, a variation of an idea which can be mostly traced back to a prominent Austrian figure, Guido von List, who was a revivalist of ancient Germanic pagan traditions.
And von List is a character in Vanguard. What the heck, bro? That's so weird.
Chiefly contributed to a branch within the Ariosophy ideology that came into full effect later. You see, Ariosophists believed in the so-called, quote-unquote, ancient wisdom of the Indo-Aryan race that inhabited lands around modern-day Iran and northern India in prehistoric times. List believed in the purported superiority of this race and the importance of their spiritual and mystical traditions that have been lost over time. He claimed to have rediscovered—
See, I wonder if that actually ties in with stuff in the Bible, because he's talking about these, like, people that were scattered, that were incredibly important, of, like, a higher race. Oh, man, like, it is just insane how much the original storyline, at the very least, took inspiration. You really don't see this type of stuff with Dark Ether. Like, they did their research back in the day, man.
Some of these traditions with some mystical moon runes that are said to have appeared to him in a dream. I do believe somebody forgot to take their meds for real. Shortly after World War I, the Thule Society was formed in Germany.
And Thule is also in Call of Duty World War II, right? So it's cool how, like, even just the spin-off games are taking stuff from the original, even more so than Dark Ether, which is kind of wild. World War II and Vanguard have more rich lore. I don't know about all that, bro. I don't know about
Focusing
all
on
that.
esotericism and the occult, some members of the society were interested in the idea of an ancient Aryan civilization that had once existed in the north, believing that they held advanced knowledge and technology. They saw themselves as descendants of this civilization and believed that they were destined to reclaim this lost knowledge and build a new so-called purified world order. Other members, of course, saw themselves as the true inheritors of the—
I wonder if that's also how Illuminati, or Richtofen gets his Illuminati tie. They never really explain that throughout the storyline. They just say, oh yeah, he's in Illuminati during like 5 Keynote or Toten and Ascension. But it's just like, when you get this backstory of it, you're like, oh, he's already been invested into it, right? Because of the MPD and all that. That's just so cool. Even the MPD looks like the Illuminati, right? Like, it's just, it all stems down, right? That's just so cool.
And believed they were superior to other races and were destined to rule the world. Now, how this plays into effect in the war has to do with the fact that there were a couple of people in this society that will later become prominent Nazi leaders, and also to do with the fact that this society sponsored the German Workers' Party, which none other than Hitler joined about a year or so later, with the party renamed to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or simply the Nazi Party. Now, as the Nazi Party gained more power, the SS and Heinrich Himmler had a division called the Einheitsbrigade formed, based around these topics of ancient cultures and practices in support of the war effort. This think tank was tasked to promote racial absurdities and doctrines, fostering the idea that Germans are the pure descendants of an Aryan race superior to other racial groups, replacing the idea of Indo-Aryans entirely. And while it's a common thing to assume that they instead went with a stereotypical image associated with Aryans, but with white skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes, you didn't really need any of those features to be Aryan in their definition. As long as you were Germanic and definitely not Jewish or Slavic, then no crimes would...
I would be completely destroyed because I'm Slavic. I mean, sure, I might look Aryan, but I'm not at all.
Necessarily be committed against you. Racial typology was a big thing in that they believed each so-called quote-unquote race had a distinct separate branch in evolution, and certain quote-unquote races are inferior to others. An idea dating back to the 18th century, with certain figures the likes of Christoph Miners, whom the Nazis look up to in terms of intellectualism. How do they determine which race is which? Well, by looking at physical factors, of course. Really, the entire idea of distinct races goes against modern science and has always been a method to promote inequality and eugenics. The majority of genetic differences are found within an ethnic group than between. We are all really one interconnected species with one common origin point in the end.
I mean, this is absolutely factual. Like, at least tying into what's real life. We all actually originate from Africa and come from there, which is so crazy. And then also what's wild is just like, this is kind of making me love what Ultimus was, right? Like, sure, Ultimus were incredibly offensive, and like, yeah, there were a bunch of articles written about that later on throughout time, but I just think that what made them so interesting, not even just their quotes, but like the history that they came from is also based in reality, like with Richthofen literally being a part of the German party. And also, like, every other single character was very well imprinted inside of their own world government. So you had, like, Tokyo with Japan's government. You had Dempsey with the American government. Nikolai with the Russian government, you know? So I just love that. Like, you don't really get that nowadays. Like, Dark Ether is just... There's no, like, tie-ins with the real world. It's just, like, go do this, you know? Like, it feels like I'm in a playground.
Hitler, with these
right?
ideas at hand, later went on to become one of the people most directly responsible for the Holocaust. It caused mass genocides of millions of Jewish people, millions of Polish people, hundreds of thousands of Roma people, and countless people who were queer in any sort of way, whether it be non-conformative gender identities or sexualities, prisoners of war, and also disabled in any capacity.
Yeah, the amount of genocides that were committed literally from this point forward is insane. And only like about like a 20 or 30 year span with like Stalin, Mao, and also Hitler as well. So it's just, like the amount is absolutely just horrific, truly tragic, man.
Among a myriad of other victims. Anyone they saw a threat to their white supremacist state would become a victim. So as far as esotericism and the occult goes, even with the ideas having a place in the beginning of the Nazi movement, they still mainly use those ideas to justify and define absurd racial identities and nationalism. However, that did not stop the rise of conspiracy theories popping up after the 50s, what with bringing up the all too well-known with extraterrestrial aliens and traded UFO schematics. Ah, of course, the shit.
Yeah, there's like a big conspiracy theory that like that's all just like a government inside job. That's a literal whole other can of worms. But I think that is literally hilarious because that is also such a basis of what COD Zombies is. Like the lunar landers literally look like UFOs. Like you have monkeys going into space and stuff like that. Level of thought is just not really present anymore. Now you just get like Mimic because it transforms into other items. Okay, what does that mean? You know, like
of this day and age never acknowledge the spirited expose. Now, one of the all too popular conspiracy theories mainly center around the idea of the Vril-Ya Society. There is a popular concept called the Hollow Earth, which stems from both old mythology and scientists from notably the 18th century. The concept revolves around there being a vast interior realm within the Earth that could be grounds for civilization. It's a popular notion.
The Nether. Well, we all know that like the inner part of the Earth is very hot and very pressurized. And so it's like, yeah, is it hollow? Like, I mean, with the conspiracy theory, obviously, but well,
Ocean in a bunch
it's interesting because it all ties in, man. It's like, were there people inside the earth? You know, we were in buried. I mean, Leroy's there.
mythologies and folklore. It pops up as the Greek underworld for one. Now, you might remember reading about the myth of Orpheus, who's
literally, this is ancient evil in BO4. Quite literally. Like a place inside the earth, right? Where 9 was like the map where we had to take this like ritual ceremony, even just to enter this area, right? So, man, Chaos was really good. I definitely like Chaos more than Dark Ether. Just the amount of lore they were able to play with is way better.
Lover Eurydice died after a bite she got from a snake. Struck with grief, he goes to this cave known to be the entrance to the underworld to plead with Hades and retrieve her, with it resulting in Hades allowing him to take Eurydice out so long as he doesn't look back at her until they're fully out, which he fails to do so. In a possible parallel warning against the pitfalls of human curiosity. It also pops up in the Hebrew Bible, what with Sheol, described as a sort of purgatory.
Sheol as like, yeah, pretty much just hell. Yeah,
for all souls, good or bad, to end up in, with many scholars interpreting it to be
Sheol's more hell, I would say,
a dark, gloomy place deep beneath the earth. With it being a popular notion in all things mythology,
it has 3 different definitions from what I know in the Hebrew Bible. Like, it's either in the grave, in the literal core of the earth, or you're just in a state of Sheol, which just means dead. So I guess those are like the 3 terms for it.
In folklore, it eventually led to this book published in 1871 by Edward Bulwer Lytton titled The Coming Race. It centers around this mysterious, powerful energy dubbed Vril and the advanced alien civilization deep within the earth that harnesses it. Now, the term Vril is probably not too unfamiliar, seeing as how it pops up numerous times in the zombies lore, but with the Vril device and
it's also interesting because like that Vril golden rod device is actually, I didn't even realize, but I've seen it in multiple places, even where I live, and I didn't realize that it's actually connected to like the Buddhist religion, which I think is just, don't call me, hopefully I'm right on that. It's either Buddhism or Zen, one of the two, but I just think that's just so fascinating that like they would just literally take one of those, put it in the COD Zombies game. Like, what a different time.
11, which is arguably elite speak for the same word. The concept of Vril as an all-too-powerful life energy is actually one that is ancient. It pops up in several cultures and folklore, such as...
So it makes me wonder, yeah, maybe Jimmy Zielinski's idea was obviously not keepers and apothecans, but maybe it was like a secret race of people inside the earth, like the Hollow Earth here, like he's talking about. That would have been so interesting to explore.
Anna in Hindu culture as a sort of life force that can be harnessed.
Yeah, maybe it is Hinduism. I can't remember what religion the golden rod is from. Somebody's got to tell me. Maybe it is Hinduism. I cannot remember.
References dating back to as much as 3,000 years ago. And Seidr in Old Norse mythology, which while admittedly is a general term for the practice of prophetic and fate-changing magic, it still deals with utilizing natural energies, which isn't all too dissimilar, albeit more nuanced. The Coming Race kind of puts a stamp on that concept in a tale that starts off with this American man who had a friend working as an engineer. This friend extends him an invitation to this mine he found to be interesting, convinced it held a vast amount of valuable mineral deposits, the likes of which no one had ever seen before, and he wanted him to come along and explore stuff. Now, agreeing with his friend, the narrator heads there into the interior of this mine and arrives at the side of the shaft with a chasm that purportedly leads down to such wealth. His friend first descends himself, alone, into the dark chasm in a rickety cage, testing the atmosphere.
Literally sounds like Buried. He sounds like he's describing Buried from an actual standpoint of the lore and the gameplay.
With a safety lamp. Minutes go by. Then an hour. The friend finally comes back up, and the narrator notices he has a pale expression on his face and a very disturbed look in his eyes. He merely says the descent seemed unsafe, and he promptly leads the narrator to the other parts of the mine dismissively, eager to move on. The narrator notices his demeanor has completely changed from being quite upbeat and adventurous to unusually reserved and withdrawn. As night came and they sat—
Oh, and it's kind of like what happened with Richthofen when he touched the MPD, right? Like, you get those similar events to this lore. It's so wild how much is taken. It's crazy.
Around a campfire, the narrator finally asks his friend, frankly, what he saw in that chasm. After taking a moment, his friend answers that as he finished his descent and stepped out of the cage, he found himself on a ridge that kept slanting downwards, with darkness permeating it so strongly that his lamp could do nothing. Much to his surprise, however, he saw an ambient light at the end, strong enough that he didn't even need the lamp. Now descending further down into the chasm, he was aghast, finding the ridge to now form a level road illuminated by artificial gas lamps placed at regular intervals. Hearing a hum of human voices in the distance, disturbed at the sheer implications of this discovery, he proceeded to retrace his steps and then reunited with the narrator. Now hearing all this, the narrator realizes his friend forgot to take his meds for real, but in
literally that's the whole point of the story. I was like, wait, where is this leading?
actuality, he persuades his friend to descend down into the chasm again, but this time together, albeit with a bit of back and forth. The following day they went back in, and what resulted was a long, treacherous descent that kinda resulted in his friend fucking dying because he slipped on a rock and his rope kinda broke, hovering over the
Brother, guillotine and the buried? Bro, like, it makes you wonder, why is there a guillotine and a hanging noose in buried? They never explain that. Here we go. This is literally Zelensky's last attempt. And honestly, it makes sense that his final map was low-key going to be probably like a Middle Earth map, a Hollow Earth map, where it's like you're finally delving into the deep. I mean, we could all just be looking into this way too far, but I think he's onto something, connecting the Vril also with this story. Like, it's literally like this life source that was inside of the Earth. It's just so interesting to me because Blundell completely changed what zombies, I think, was originally supposed to be about. I think this is legitimately where Black Ops 3 was going to go if Zelensky decided to make it, which is mad, bro. Wow.
The corpse of his beloved friend, he hears an indescribable hiss behind him. Straining his eyes in the darkness, he sees a large reptilian mass emerge in the distance, infinitely larger than any alligator of our world. The narrator's fight-or-flight instinct kicks in, and ain't no way the human instinct would decide to fight a Lovecraftian dinosaur, so he runs.
Well, see, that's the other thing. It's like, I think this like Lovecraftian stuff would have emerged either way, either on Shadows of Evil or let's say this Hollow Earth theory. But the thing is just like, I would have been so interesting to see like prehistoric animals, maybe rather than like aliens and stuff. I still think Apothicons and Keepers are really cool. It's very innovative. Like, there's really nothing like it. So yeah, I mean, I probably would have preferred that over this Hollow Earth theory, but man, would it have been interesting to at least see what it could have been like, man. That's
runs
so
down
cool.
the valley at utmost speed, taking some time before stopping and returning just to see the body of his friend is now gone. With no other option, he proceeds down the lamplit road toward a large building that he's able to discern in the distance. Building not much different than of the earliest form of Egyptian architecture, supported by giant columns. And then a human emerges out from the building. Or at least he thought it was a human. It ended up...
It's interesting because I think what ended up happening and the reason why Chaos's story was made in BO4 is because they wanted to take more of these out-of-the-box concepts. But you really can only do so much with a modern shooter or even a World War II shooter or a futuristic shooter. Like, that is what I'm saying. Call of Duty really needs to traverse more into the fantastical area, which is what Chaos was about to do, man. And it's just too unfortunate it got cut short. It really
a large
is.
ethereal being with a face resembling those of angels. Not necessarily in terms of the human perception of beauty, but rather mathematical symmetry and perfection. The being leads the narrator to some of the leaders of their civilization, where they come as close to killing him as the two half-spheres of the Demon Core came close before leading to the incident. At this point in the story,
it literally makes me think that I think the Vrilya were supposed to either look like aliens, like not like Keepers or Apothicons. I'm talking like stereotypical like ET looking aliens, or like angels, like he's saying, like complete perfect beings. That would have been so cool to see in a COD game, bro.
It pretty much becomes world building for the next 200 out of 300 pages. I shit you not. The gist of it is that there's an advanced race known as Avrilya that once roamed the earth a couple thousand years ago as creatures as primitive as humans now. They came upon a flood of such dangerous...
So maybe they're futuristic humans, right? I mean, that kind of makes sense. There's even been theories about that IRL. well. But bro, that would have been so cool. I wish we would have gotten to see that, man.
Proportions that it led them underground, from which point they built various civilizations. Eventually, the modern powerful form of their civilization could harness this energy called vril, which could be used for utter destruction by any individual on a level that made war and personal conflicts a thing of the past due to the principle of assured mutual destruction.
It would have been cool because I feel like that would have been made a way more clear response to where 115 comes from, where it's actually like vril. It's these like perfect beings. Like, I like the Apothecan explanation where like the Apothecans shoot the meteors and all these different universes and whatnot. But still, the vril one, that sounds sick, man.
And also healing of equal proportions. Its energy is said to be one that is softer and healthier than from any fossil fuel or renewable, and is strong enough to animate objects and give them life. The energy is, of course, beyond the limits of human understanding, and only the Vrilia can truly harness it.
Like, I still think we would have had a character like Dr. Monty in the story if Zelensky was around, but I genuinely think that replacing either Keepers or Apothecans with like these vril perfect beings in Middle Earth and like having all this like prehistoric stuff that like has lived for thousands and thousands of years on the Earth, I feel like that could have been so cool.
Harness this energy in the form of weapons that look like staffs, and if any of this sounds familiar, that's because it literally is Lamau my ass off. The main shtick of this race that the author develops is literally taking the patriarchal Andrew Tate-ass concept of society prevalent at the time and flipping it, so that instead of men having all the rights and women having none, it was the opposite. And I'm not entirely too sure whether or not—
Oh, that is so interesting. So it's like, maybe after thousands of years, they figured out what's like the best way to run society. Yeah, it's like going against like a perfect society. It honestly makes me think that Chaos was kind of building up to that concept as well, with like the 9 and the guys in the masks and stuff. Wow, that is cool though.
Not this juxtaposition was meant to be a satirical take to drive home the pitfalls of societies that place too much value in one made-up role or what, but as a matter of fact, this book was written in 1871 after all, and there were admittedly going to be a lot of racial ideas too that aren't really the best. After about 200 pages of world building around this race and their politics, the main hook finally develops, and it's literally one where the narrator has not one, but 2 of this race's powerful women fall in love with him. And I did get the hint that the author really do be self-inserting like a motherfucker. Why it ended up being such a hook was to do with the fact that it was illegal, so to speak, for this race to breed with another. It ended up being sort of a commentary on a lot of the traditions of the time, where it was discouraged and outlawed for a person of one race to marry and mix with another. The race accepted him as a guest in the beginning, but the so-called elders of this race who make the laws and everything literally said that they'd burn him alive with the power of vril itself if he were to agree to any of the women's requests. But
oh, see, that is interesting, man, because yeah, if they would have added this in COD, bro, you could add so many interesting characters to like play against. Honestly, it's literally reminded me of like the Ancient Evil Easter egg, like something where it's like this a huge amount of like back dialogue with the NPCs and like how it changes up a whole society. It literally reminds me of like even the BO2 campaign, which unfortunately Raul Menendez literally just passed away today, the voice actor. God bless his soul. Rest in peace. It's just so sad.
At a certain point, they decide that they'll burn him anyway because the princess herself fell in love with the guy. Look, I don't know either, bro. The concept of an ancient, powerful race in a hidden part of the world is an idea that can be mostly
really
traced
cool
back to Plato and his account of Atlantis. You see,
everybody was also theorizing we were gonna get an Atlantis map too, man, bro. This was literally back when the community was so strung up on the Shangri-La being on Mars type of stuff. And like there was so many hints to Atlantis. It is literally insane. I genuinely think that if Chaos had 2 more DLCs, one of them would probably have been Atlantis.
Atlantis was supposed to be this ancient kingdom on an island that beheld such technological superiority over other races that it practically ruled the world. But due to corruption in its people and the government, the gods cursed them by flooding it entirely in a series of earthquakes and floods. Now, while this mostly served as a parable and a literary device warning against corruption, possibly drawing from Plato's own dissatisfaction with the government in Athens at the time, it eventually led people to actually believe that there was was a real Atlanta somewhere. Now, remember when this video was about zombies? Yeah, me neither, bro. But the truth is, it has always been.
Nah, bro, trust me. You've been explaining 15 minutes of just lore, but I've been literally tying it into zombies as you've been speaking. Like, I'm just so impressed how much has been taken without like even detracting from the original source material. It's like it's even adding on to it, making it like an expansion of it. It's sick. I love it.
Zombies in one way or another, and it's mostly to do with Richtofen grand scheme than anything else. You see, there's a ton more nuance to the zombies lore now with multiple dimensions and shit, but at the time, they certainly weren't thinking of any of that at all.
I 100% agree. Yeah, this was literally supposed to be one concurrent story back in Black Ops 1. Black Ops 2, with the campaign, is where you start seeing all the different endings and all that. Nah. It was supposed to be some sort of real storyline going into a middle Hollow Earth. Bro, my goodness, I wish I could have seen Zelensky finish that. Wow.
Most of what they...
Zelensky, I know you're working at Ubisoft. I know you're working on X-Defiant, so please make X-Defiant zombies. Thank you.
Could go off of were these myths, legends, and conspiracies. So when it comes to Richtofen's grand scheme as we knew it in the map Moon, it was a culmination of ideas that took inspiration from numerous sources, both real and mythical. We knew that Group 935 found Element 115 to have powers that resulted in both teleportation and reanimation. We knew Richtofen was at odds with the group, and mainly Chief Dr. Maxis.
It also makes me think like maybe Element 115 was not even like a pure form of Rilya, because when you have even the VR11 in Call of the Dead, it's actually a yellow energy that Vril is. It's not blue. So, man, it would have been so interesting to hear about that. It really does feel like we were building up to some big interplanetary even type experience, which COD Zombies would have been just so amazing for. I'm telling you, Zelensky was way too far ahead for the time he was building on freaking Xbox 360 consoles, man. That is
wild. Who didn't want to focus on teleportation as he wanted, but instead wanted to primarily get funding from the Nazis and work on undead super soldiers. That part of the lore is quite established at this point. You know, the betrayal of Maxis, Samantha, and all. Richtofen used the effects 115 had on the human mind, what with fostering severe schizophrenia and delusions of reality to brainwash notably the three characters we play as in Ultimus. The more theoretical side of things lies in his scheme to
I honestly think they could have built up to Richtofen literally being one of the perfect beings. They literally could have made him as like a Vril being. Not necessarily just like the person that controls the zombies, obviously at the conclusion of Moon, but like the actual, like one of the original Vril beings. That's kind of what I thought they were going for in BO3 with Monty before Revelations came out and just sort of confused it all up, but still would have been so sick to see, man.
Agartha and control the undead and reality as we know it. Agartha is simply a mythological term for an ancient kingdom that once existed in the Hollow Earth. But in Zombies, the place is more so in another plane of reality than inside the literal Earth. It's essentially the home.
It's true, like, yeah, this could have been part of what the Vril was. And I think, honestly, Blundell probably was listening in on the original story that they were going to make and probably just decided to make his own variation of it. Because, yeah, you can still see some roots of that idea placed even into his maps, like Origins and Mob, you know?
Of the Rilya story, and is a place of great power. How the scheme started was at a point before the maps in the story, when Richtofen first successfully teleported and found himself near the Ether Pyramid, or the MPD. Touching it led to him hearing voices in his head, which only got worse with time. Eventually, of course, in trying to teleport Samantha to kill her off with Maxis, she instead finds herself near the MPD-2 where she entered it, assuming control of the Ether. Now, Richtofen wanted to get back to the MPD and open it up so that he could enter it himself, but he knew doing so would require an ungodly amount of energy, an amount that Vril, as he could harness it, couldn't really give. Luckily, he could devise a plan anyway. Enter quantum mechanics. There is an interesting phenomenon that happens when you have two microscopic, uncharged conductive plates held a few nanometers apart in a vacuum, and that for some reason, there happens to be an attractive force in between them. The only principle...
I've learned more from this video than the last 4 years of university, and we're only 18 minutes in.
relevant here should be gravity, but on a scale this small, the effects would be so tiny as to not even be practically measurable. This effect is known as the Casimir effect.
Okay, so I'm not a scientist, but is this similar to nuclear fission? Because I know when nukes go off, it's basically like splitting the atom, you know, Oppenheimer. So, like, I feel like this might be similar, but I'm not a scientist. Don't quote me.
Now, vacuum energy, or zero-point energy, describes a mode where virtual particles that basically pop in and out of existence, would dominate in a vacuum, and thus it'd be the lowest possible state of energy. This would then cause an imbalance in the areas between the plates and the areas outside the plates, where more powerful virtual particles would dominate less between the plates due to a lack of available space, therefore causing an attraction as a result of differences in pressure. The catch is...
So basically, it's like having different pressure on the outside or on the inside than the outside, which basically creates a massive effect.
That this would only really be measurable when the distance between the plates is extremely small, with the effect producing more than 1 atmosphere of pressure when the distance is but a bunch of nanometers. Now, this approach is more of the classical heuristic approach, whereas the newer approach is just to consider it as a byproduct of van der Waals forces, weak forces that occur between molecules due to temporary imbalances in the distribution of electrons within the molecules, causing one end to have more negative of a charge and the other more positive.
So yeah, basically it's an imbalance between negative and positive energy, which I guess is kind of like splitting an atom. Not really, but you're creating some sort of imbalance that makes a big boom. That's basically the layman's terms of what we're watching.
An attraction
right
occurring between two of these molecules. And you're gonna ask me how the fuck this is relevant to the zombie storyline, but all this time, the zombies seem to cook in the zombie storyline, and we might as well consider they were cooking crystal meth, and no one said anything. So at least let me cook for a bit, alright? Now in the map Ascension, the Casimir mechanism was introduced as a concept.
Yes.
It being any type of mechanism that exploits the Casimir effect in any sort of...
And it's also literally the first Easter egg. So that's what I'm telling you. They had this plan, man. They literally did.
The first thing you hear is Dr. Gersh pleading us to repair the Casimir mechanism in order to let him escape what can only be assumed to be the ether, as he was betrayed by another doctor called Yuri after bro threw a Gersh device at the motherfucker. The Gersh device itself
couldn't even be me, bro.
Is a Casimir mechanism. As you might notice, that is literally just 2 metal plates, and while I don't claim to be an expert in the art of closing a waffle maker and creating...
Oh, it's interesting because the plates he's talking about is literally right here. That is so cool.
Ethereal
wow.
black holes as a result. It is certainly one of the Casimir effects of all time. As powerful as it is, it's not until we shoot like a billion wonder weapons.
Like, see, this is what I mean. Treyarch literally had to, like, learn about freaking quantum mechanics and Casimir effects to even just create what we have. Like, all of what you're seeing is somewhat based off of reality. That, to me, is so cool. Like, it's a little bit haunting because, I mean, this is real? But it's not. It's like the fictional version of what could have been real, which is so cool.
Infused with 115 into the Gersh device that there's enough power for a wormhole sustainable enough for Gersh to travel through. One could argue
literally
that
right
115
here
itself is infused with Vril energy. Now, Richtofen knows he has to harness Vril energy, and he sought the Vril device and called the dead to do so. A device which strikes a parallel to the staves the Rilya held in the coming race. He then sought a highly potent piece of element 115 in Shangri-La called the Focusing Stone, which he shrank down to combine with the Vril device. And even then, the energy combined wouldn't have been enough. He had to harness the Casimir effect and charge the thingamajig he invented, putting the whatchamacallit in between the 2 plates.
In the plates! Yeah, I was literally about to say, one of the things that he was showing us with the imbalance of the positive and negative was literally inside the plates. Like, that is crazy! How is this even real? Because, like, I didn't realize this. I'm not a freaking quantum mechanics major.
In the vast vacuum of space on the moon, he harnesses all of its available energy and retrieves the doohickey for what would finally be enough to open the MPD and control the world.
That is
after infusing the souls of like 100 people, of course. This design is very human.
Yeah, the Easter egg is, you know, that's after the fact.
The exact motive of Richtofen and why he wants to rule the world wasn't exactly ever clear in Black Ops 1, but you did have certain things like the lyrics to this Easter.
I genuinely think they were going to explain that later on, and I genuinely think Richtofen would have been, like, a part of the Vril
egg song.
That would have been
dictating how he wants to rule the world, and it dictates insanity. That's what it dictates. He felt as if he'd been wronged, in not being allowed to chase his dreams at the research facility. That, combined with 115-induced schizophrenia and delusions, combined with hearing the voices of the corrupted Rilya in his head giving him directions on what to do, might have had something to do with it, I bet. The biggest difference between the Vrilya in the 1871 book and the Vrilya in the games is to do with corruption. In the book, the Vrilya are described to live in this supposed utopia where no evil can take place. One of the major points in this book is how boring and harmful the aspect of a utopia.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is still kind of the same idea, even in Revelations, like where they need to make a whole new world and get rid of the old, and you can't get rid of me because I got the blood, you know. Like, that's a whole concept in the newer version. But I think it would have been way more interesting if these beings were actually, like, visually perfect. Like, because when you look at the Keepers and the Apothecans, they just look, like, detestable. Like, they're just aliens, you know? It's, like, it's hard to relate. Whereas I think with this Vril idea, it would have related more. Like, this image on the Revelations is a great example. Like, you're inside of the Apothecan's stomach here, and it's just, like, to me, honestly, this just looks like Halo 3. You know, it just looks too otherworldly, whereas, like, basing it on the Vril would have been, I think, much more Call of Duty-like.
Utopia really is, at least with the given depiction at hand. There are numerous events in the book where the leaders of the civilization are aghast at hearing the narrator's accounts of human history, with crimes even being a thing. It was such a foreign concept to them that it only was a thing in other alien races in the Hollow Earth that they deemed animal-like. Might be some social commentary in their own prehistoric times, equivalent to our being cavemen. With the way the race was depicted, it was a utopia in which freedom of expression and daring art weren't really ever a thing, and one gender still had less rights because social norms were a thing even there, and child slave labor was also a thing commonly utilized for the...
Well, so this is the other thing, right? Like, I'm so curious how they would have actually gone around the world issues of it, because obviously Call of Duty is a very big game, so maybe that might have been why they stopped, because, yeah, they could have gone into, like, huge issues with, like, obviously, like, the gender issue, and also the racism issues. And so it is very interesting because, yeah, now with the way the world has evolved, it is interesting because maybe if we had gone towards that Vril storyline, maybe people would not have been too receptive of it nowadays. It's just so interesting looking back and seeing truly what could have been.
Betterment of their societies, among other things. But hey, no crime and war, so that's a utopia. Am I right, fellas? Am I right, fellas? Now, in the games, the Vrilya remain synonymous with the Keepers, existing before time and space were ever even a thing. Unlike the book, there was corruption between the Keepers, which led to a separate branch in their species called the Apothecons.
Yeah, and they basically just made two separate races, the Keepers and the Apothecons, to kind of just, like, throw that away from human issues, which, honestly, in hindsight, I think is very smart. I think Blundell did a great job in that, and so...
Elder ones
can't even be mad.
Have been around since the very beginning. And since corruption is like a Lovecraftian concept which is set to take a toll on their appearance as time goes on, really I almost find it disappointing that the Elder Apothecon god in Revelations wasn't like 50 times bigger. And so that was what the
True. Like, he could have literally been a size of a universe. Like, that's kind of the type of boss I was thinking of. Like, some Kingdom Hearts type boss, you
community
know?
Cooked, trying to make sense of it all, before Blundell came and gave us interactive quantum mechanics as steps in his Easter egg quests.
Legit.
The thing that made Black Ops 1 so special to me is how it didn't take itself too seriously. The lore manifested...
Didn't take itself too seriously while still being based in history, which is extremely difficult to do. I can't even name one other thing that's done that.
Itself in the form of cryptic radios and fan theories, and all we'd do was see which theories the devs would end up running with. It wasn't until Blundell came that there was an effort to make the clusterfuck of ancient beings, time travel, and quantum mechanics actually cohesive. And it wasn't until Black Ops 3 that Blundell and Craig Houston actually had a story written out for the maps to revolve around. Now, there's a lot of people who dislike...
Yeah, because they were basically whiffing it as they were going. They were completely going by a whim for half the time. It really wasn't until Black Ops 3, like he's saying, where they actually started to get a storyboard and write things down.
Black Ops 1 Zombies, for its paradoxes regarding time travel and how the execution doesn't make sense, and that you destroy the Earth in a year set before all the other events could ever take place, makes you teleport into space and kill zombies. Like, it's not supposed to make sense. To circle back to my current situation, there had been strange happenings in my life ever since I discovered all this information, you see. It would start with little things. A whisper behind me here and there, even though I was alone. Things disappearing around the
This is just what happens when you're 12, bro. I remember when I was 12, I told my mom I saw Slender Man outside. Like, no, I didn't.
Then I started seeing a strange figure in the corner of my vision. Haters will say I'm not taking my meds, and while I don't deny any of these allegations, I assure you that correlation is not causation, ladies and gentlemen. It all culminated in the event that led me to run out of my house and into a dark, empty, abandoned house's musty basement. The world has gone cold. I seem to have been placed in purgatory. You see, I woke up one day as usual.
Bro's in the frozen forest. How is he gonna end this video?
As I was washing my face, I looked up at the bathroom mirror, and...
Wait, so that was in the frozen forest? You can't just end the video like that, fam. Not... Okay.